Often, when we knit objects, like this sweater, there's an inside and an outside. In knitting, the side that faces the world is referred to as the right side or the front side. The side that touches your skin is usually referred to as the wrong side or the back side. Sometimes the two sides are exactly the same, like our swatch so far, but often they're different. When working flat, we alternate between working across the front side rows, the odd rows, then turning and working across the back, the even rows. When working flat in neutrino, the front side rows or right side rows are the odd rows, and the back side rows are the even rows. We show backside rows with little hash marks, as you can see on all the even rows. But you'll need to be aware that most patterns don't do this. Remember that when looking at the chart in neutrino, it's like you're looking at the front side of your work. This is what a knit stitch looks like on the right side of the fabric, or the odd rows. It's meant to represent that the knit stitch lays flat. The symbol for the knit stitch on the back side or wrong side is different than the symbol on the front side. That's because a knit stitch worked on the back side looks different on the front side. When looking at one row of knit stitches in two colors, you can see when I turn it over little bumps in the fabric. The front of a knit stitch lays flat and forms a V shape. The back of a knit stitch has a bump or ridge. The reverse of a knit stitch is called a purl stitch. It has a bump and looks identical to the back of a knit stitch. Don't worry, we know this is confusing. We'll come back to this. To summarize for now, a knit stitch forms a V on the side you work it on. The back of a knit stitch has a bump and looks identical to a purl stitch. A purl stitch has a bump on the side you work it on, and the back of a purl stitch looks like a knit stitch. With the knit stitch, your yarn is in the back. To purl, bring the yarn to the front between the needles. Insert the needle into the front of the stitch from left to right, so the working needle is on top. Wrap the yarn over and under the working needle. Draw the loop through, removing the stitch from the right needle. We'll switch colors to make it easier to see. Insert the needle into the front of the stitch from left to right. Wrap the yarn over and under the working needle. Draw the loop through, removing the stitch from the right needle. With the knit stitch, your yarn is in the back. To purl, bring the yarn to the front, under the needle. Insert the needle into the front of the stitch from left to right, so the working needle is on top. Wrap the yarn over and under the working needle. Draw the loop through, removing the stitch from the right needle. We'll switch colors to make it easier to see. Insert the needle into the front of the stitch from left to right. Wrap the yarn over and under the working needle. Draw the loop through, removing the stitch from the right needle. Let's look at the pattern again. The purl stitch on the front side, or odd rows, is shown as a dot, which represents the bump. The purl stitch on the back side, or even rows, looks like a knit stitch on the front. Remember that when looking at the chart, it's like you're looking at the front of the fabric. Let's compare. When we knit every row starting out, when looking at the front, this gave us knit stitches for odd rows, but purl stitches on the front side for even rows. Similarly, when you alternate between knit stitches for odd rows and purl stitches for even rows, when looking at the front side, every row looks to be knit rows. How do you know whether to knit or purl? The chart shows the front of the work. If you're on an odd row and you see what looks like a knit stitch without hash marks, you knit. If you're on an even row and you see what looks like the symbol for a knit stitch and it's hashed, you purl. Purling on an even row gives a knit stitch on the front. Knitting on an even row gives a purl stitch on the front.